Hi everyone, thanks a lot for joining us today. Our talk is called Legacy Referral Schemes Don't Support DE&I. Here's how to make sure they do. So we'll kick off with some introductions. So I'm Sam Davies, the CEO of Relinks. We're an employee referral platform, if you haven't already heard about us, and we've been in the market since the beginning of 2018, and really excited to talk to you about what we're doing from a DE&I perspective today with one of our key advisors, Paul Maxin, and I'll hand over to him.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, I'm Paul Maxin. I'm the founder of a small consultancy called Maxin Talent. I've been around the block a few years with tours of duty at PwC, Unilever, Zalando, the Financial Conduct Authority, Publicis Sapient, and more recently I'm doing some consulting work for NHS England and NHS Improvement. Thanks for the opportunity, Sam, and inviting me along today.
Cheers.
Diversity, equality and inclusion, past, present and future. I first started working way back in the 1980s, and I can categorically state that in the past, that far past, DE&I wasn't really on the agenda at all. And indeed, many decisions were made with conscious bias rather than unconscious bias, because nobody really knew what unconscious bias was, because they hadn't heard of it. Fortunately, we live in a much more enlightened times, and certainly things have moved on exponentially in some cases in terms of how we work as a result of the pandemic. So many organizations, and we've proved that through remote working and flexible hours that business needs can be met. Some organizations are very open to part-time and job share opportunities. An example I can give about that was a few years ago I worked for the Financial Conduct Authority, and there were two senior leaders there who shared a job at director level, and furthermore they worked at it 3 days each, so they had an overlapping day, a total of 6 days, and that led to greater output and outcomes. Organisations now are alive to shared parental leave and support, certainly over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, but certainly exponentially in the last 5, all of the organisations I've either worked for or consulted with have had an increasing number of workplace affiliation groups. So again, DE&I becomes front and centre on the agenda. And with the shock of earlier this year, George Floyd and the rise of Black Lives Matter, the importance of Black Lives Matter, many organisations went through some deep learning and education, and indeed held a significant number of listening sessions, which led to far greater learning. So, and yet, many leaders lack self-awareness and perception. And although DE&I is front and centre of many agendas, some of the data and statistics that I'm about to share with you will show that we've still got some way to go. I'm a great believer in using data and information to inform strategy and as such inform outcomes. And during 2020, Accenture published some data specifically on this and where leaders are with regard to DE&I. And some of the data is both compelling and in some ways surprising and shocking. Let's take a look at it. So 68% were found in the study. 68% of leaders believe they create an empowering environment where employees can be themselves, raise concerns and innovate. So it's compelling as well that 32% of leaders don't think they do that. And I can also say that in the data, there are 36% of employees, only 36% of employees believe in empowering environments being created. And over on the right-hand side, when compared, 76% of leaders against 29% of employees agreed that workplace culture is flexible regarding when, where, and how to work. And given that we're still in a pandemic and have been working, many of us, flexibly and more flexibly, and from home in particular over the course of the last few months, those statistics are particularly compelling. So in short, leaders and employees feel very differently about culture and inclusion, even though for leaders, DE&I is front and centre, and they'll pay lip service to it being front and centre of their agendas. The business case for DE&I is overwhelming, and yet here we are in 2020, where only 2.8% of Fortune 500 companies have a female CEO. And many of you watching this now will either be in startups or indeed scale-ups. And it's surprising for me to note that, again, only 1 in 5 startups have a female founder. It'll come as no surprise, I'm sure, that financial issues are what leaders care about most. 76% of them. And only 34% and 21% care about workplace diversity and workplace culture the most. And yet these things are linked. I can give a specific example. I used to work at Unilever for 7 years. And 70% of Unilever's consumers globally are women. And yet way back in 2009, that wasn't reflected at all with Unilever as an organisation in the workplace. So they made a commitment as part of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan in 2009 that by 2020, 50% of the management would be female. Not just because it was good practice, not just because they wanted gender equality, although all of that is true, but because it made financial business sense, with 70% of their consumers being women. And so it was leader-led. 5, I think, if not more, of the Unilever executive were on the Global Diversity Board, and that included the CEO. And they set the strategy and they set the targets. And of course, having been leader-led and with a global oversight board and with the executive-led, they actually achieved their target a year early. So 51% of Unilever's workforce now globally are women, and they achieved that back in 2019. I'm currently doing some consulting work for NHS England and NHS Improvement. Clearly, many of the trusts are concerned about financial issues. But the NHS England and Improvement is the largest employer in Europe. They have over 1.3 million employees. And then if you take GP practices, which are not part of the NHS, but indirectly, then that comes up to 1.7 million. And as many of you will be aware, it's one of the most diverse workforces anywhere in the UK or indeed anywhere in Europe. And yet in leadership, CEOs and senior executives within different NHS foundations and different NHS organisations, only a very small proportion of those come from a BAME background, which is not reflective of the working population within NHS England as a whole. Certainly strategically now, they have a specific focus on that, and the NHS People Promise is very much around inclusivity, and they're moving their talent management practices and processes from what I would describe as an exclusive one to a very inclusive one. And indeed, the purpose behind that is to ensure a greater supply of BAME representation in particular in leadership positions over the course of time. So, these stats would imply that progress is slow and employers are largely paying lip service to DE&I. However, it is front and centre on many agendas. So over to you, Sam, to see how we can progress.
So Paul's given us a really interesting overview as to some of the challenges that companies face when it comes to DEI. And I think it's fair to say legacy referral schemes haven't really helped. So what are the problems with legacy referrals and DEI? Well, we run a lot of focus groups when we start working with companies to understand their employees' thoughts towards referrals. And it's very much this refer friends and family mentality. You'll often ask them, what does a referral mean to you? And the answer that you'll get will be, well, it's got to be a recommendation. And then you break that down and you'll ask, well, okay, what is a recommendation? Often it's friends and family. And what you've also find out is that you've got a really small group of people that are being referred, usually between 5 to 10. And all of those people, unsurprisingly, are from similar backgrounds to the referees, which of course goes against any diversity goals. There's also a complaint that we hear quite a lot from employees when we're running these focus groups as to there being poor communication about diversity goals, about what it is the employer wants in terms of referrals. And when employers are looking at how the referral scheme is performing, there's very little data on sort of referral analytics, specifically around diversity, to track and improve what's going on. And it's due to these reasons and other problems with referral schemes that you see stats like this. White males account for 40% of successful referral hires. For women of colour, it's just 13%. But there is a way forward when it comes to referrals. Modern referral schemes can pave the way for DEI if done the right way. We're in a position now, we've got these broad personal, social and professional networks that are far more diverse than our closer community of friends and family. So the 5 key pillars to the RealLinks platform to deliver sort of DEI success when it comes to referrals are the ones I'll take you through now. The first being encouraging social introductions in those wider networks that I just talked about. Just going back to the point that I made about running focus groups, there's this feeling that referrals need to be recommendations and they're worried about the backlash if they put somebody forward who doesn't work out. So they're a bit scared, to be honest with you, to sort of make social introductions within these wider networks, which are the introductions, by the way, that you're going to see the most diversity in. So it's really important to encourage those social introductions, which we do on the platform throughout. And another key thing that we do is when they make a referral, allow them to make a distinction between the two things. Is this a recommendation or is this a social introduction? So a combination of promoting and making it clear to the employee group that you want social introductions and allowing them to explain what it is when they make the referral makes a big difference in terms of upping engagement and encouraging more diverse and more social referrals. Another thing the platform does, we auto-match employees' connections to live job vacancies. So just to break that down, when an employee joins the platform, they can connect their LinkedIn connections with it. And then our system will start matching all of their connections to live job vacancies and notifying them when a match has been made. This is only done on skills, not on relationships. Now this has a big impact going to the social introductions piece because actually the employees are seeing people being recommended to them who they wouldn't have otherwise thought of. Again, encouraging referrals beyond that friends and family. The recruiters on the platform are able to see where any of their employees' connections have been matched to live job vacancies, and this allows them to prompt the employees to encourage referrals. And what we do here is we anonymize the personal identifiers for recruiters to remove any unconscious bias from the process. A key thing that we're looking at the moment, which is really exciting, is working specifically with employee resource groups. So on the platform, we've got a gamification piece, basically like leaderboards and raffles or points-based leaderboards, and incentivizing employees to participate with referrals for like micro rewards. For example, you could win a monthly raffle. But what we're doing is specifically running campaigns with those employee resource groups, whether it be women in tech or any other employee resource group, to encourage activity, to encourage referrals, and to see more diversity as a result. And I think what's paramount, I touched on it as being a problem before, is providing detailed diversity analytics so that we can really track and improve what's happening. And of course, we can do all of these things from a platform perspective, but it's really important. This is supported by clear D&I strategy that's widely communicated from leadership. So for example, here, one of the key things that we have on the platform is an intro video right at the beginning. What we really encourage companies to do is have somebody, one of the key stakeholders, one of the key senior leadership team, talking about what it is they're trying to achieve, talking about the fact they want more diverse referrals and they want social introductions, and it makes a big difference. So I'm just going to talk about our DEI commitment. We don't have all of the answers right now, and we are very much working hard on the initiatives and on the features that I just talked about. And we're really committed to continuous learning and improvement of our platform to support DEI. As I mentioned, we're going to be working with these employee resource groups in some of the pilots and new deals that we're launching, and we're going to be tracking that and relaying case studies and results to the market. We're also very committed to working in partnership with businesses and advisors who prioritise DEI, using their insight to evolve our platform to support this objective. And what's paramount when it comes to our roadmap is things that we learn through pilots or through the full deals that we have going at the moment is to put forward things in our roadmap which are going to support DEI. So Paul and I are now going to have a bit of discussion about everything that we talked about, and we'll move on to that. Cheers. So moving on to the final part of our presentation, which is a bit of a discussion between Paul and me on some of the points that we covered in our respective parts of the presentation. Paul and I have spent quite a lot of time talking about the products and the importance of doing everything we can to support DEI, and he's been very instrumental in helping us to build out the 5 pillars that I talked about. But all of this is still pretty new. We'll be testing out the methodology, building out case studies over the coming months. So with that in mind, we've got the next best thing. I'm going to ask Paul some questions around our analysis and get his thoughts on what we're doing based on his experience in the sector. So question number 1, Paul, in terms of the issues I identified with legacy referral schemes, do they correlate with what you've seen in different organizations? Have you found that referrals are limited or have been limited to friends and family and lacking in diversity?
Yes, is the short answer, but to give some specifics on that, way back when, I can remember Pricewaterhouse and PricewaterhouseCoopers, the scheme was actually specifically called Refer a Friend at that time. So not only were you encouraged to make specific recommendations, but they were recommendations in your friendship network as opposed to your broader social or business network, and that was very, very narrow. And if you have a refer a friend or friends and family, then essentially you're referring people like us, which is not geared towards DEI at all. And I can remember actually being quite rightly challenged by somebody in the public sector at the time, who was talking about the benefits of referral campaigns, refer a friend, and they were specifically saying, well, that plays out very much against DE&I because you're just referring people like you, and the data kind of bears that out. Now, campaigns, employee referral campaigns and referral campaigns over the course of time have broadened out for sure. But as you say in your analysis, they're very much focused on recommendations, and that's been driven by organisations or recruiting teams within organisations. And those recommendations are naturally more narrow, and you're referring people who you know rather than you're referring on relationships. Whereas now, the beauty of your platform is to be able to broaden that out in terms of business and social networks and wider platforms, and you can refer on skill sets, and that in itself makes the recruiting organisation's role much easier. So although you're dealing with more candidates, potentially, you're dealing with more relevant candidates because the referrals are based on skill sets rather than narrow relationships. And that opens up the opportunity for it to be a more diverse and inclusive talent supply pool.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. You know, what staggers me sometimes when we're speaking to companies is there's a reluctance to accept that a referral can be anything other than a recommendation by certain TAs that I've spoken to who remain nameless. And, you know, that when we talk about, you know, what I talked about in my presentation, which is, you know, social referrals, and that being a really positive way to sort of get more diversity, you know, extend referrals beyond sort of friends and family. The counter that I'll often hear will be, yeah, but is that really a referral? Can they vouch for that person? You know, if we stick with that mentality and we continue to look at referrals in I guess, as they have historically been, and the way in which they've been defined under legacy referral schemes, you know, refer a friend, as you mentioned there. I don't think we are going to tackle this issue. I don't think we are going to see diversity, and I think, you know, we can encourage all of this through the tool, but it does also.
To interrupt you here, Sam, because you've really made a salient point. You know, can they vouch for this person? Any referral, whether it's the more narrowly defined referral or even the wider social referrals that your platform allows, those people are still going to have to be assessed, and they're still going to have to go through whatever form of assessment and skill sets assessment organizations do to determine who they're going to hire. So can they vouch for this person is a bit like saying, do they like the cut of his or her jib? Yeah. And that's one thing. But, you know, frankly, everybody should be assessed equally and with sufficient rigor to enable them to land the job in the first place. So, you know, this kind of different thinking that you're doing, I think, is will not dilute. Not only will it not dilute supply, but it actually doesn't make a difference to the ability to hire good people, because they're still going to have to be assessed in the first place.
Completely. And to be fair, I think most organizations we speak to are definitely moving in that direction. And there's often this disconnect. So the TA team will be very much like, okay, look, we want social introductions, not just recommendations. But that message hasn't quite been delivered to the employee groups who still think referrals need to be recommendations. So a lot of the messaging there is really important, you know, making them understand that you know, you want both. And if my message, I suppose, to any TA teams that still think referrals need to be recommendations, I think that you're arguably missing a trick, because you're not going to see the diversity that I think that you could achieve if you broaden the scope of what referrals are.
Yeah.
So, $1 million question. Do you think our 5 key pillars will turn things around for referrals and help them to support DE&I?
The short answer to that question is yes. That's why we're having this discussion, and I've found the discussions that we've had over the course of the last few months plan that out. Those 5 pillars, it's really important, because you've got a great tool that facilitates social referrals and will provide data and insights. But one of the things I like about you, Sam, and Real Links is the consultative approach that you take with your clients as well, because it's only through reimagining how referrals can occur that you get the benefit that your platform allows. In particular, you know, moving away from a relationship-driven approach to a skill set-based approach, I think is absolutely key. You also mentioned to me in an earlier discussion, we've also, one of the key factors of the 5 pillars is the affinity groups, or the employee resource groups as well. You know, over the course of the last few years, I've seen through, you know, PwC, Unilever, Financial Conduct Authority, Zalando in Germany, and Publicis Sapient, and now with the NHS, the proliferation of employee resource groups have grown exponentially, and that can only be a good thing. Earlier in my part of our presentation, talked about paying lip service. The great thing is that now employee resource groups have improved, but it's up to organizations, leadership, hiring managers, TA teams to listen and learn from those groups as well. You go back to, I think I might have mentioned it, the explosion of importance of Black Lives Matter earlier in this year and throughout. But that's just one example. And I think the shock of that has led to, in enlightened organisations, many more listening and learning sessions. And it's beholden on Real Links as part of the consultative approach to organizations to really ensure that you're listening to employee resource groups as well, that they're used absolutely appropriately and deeply, and they're not just there to pay lip service to DE&I. So I think your 5 pillars are absolutely spot on. And a core to your consultative approach, that you operate with clients, that you're, and then the platform supports those outcomes.
Thanks a lot. No, that's a really helpful overview. I think spot on with the employee resource groups. It's not, when I was talking earlier, I spoke about like running sort of campaigns with those groups, but actually I think it's far more than that. It's, and I'm really excited to be launching these campaigns with the employee resource groups over the coming months, because I think there's so much to be learned there. I think, we've got certain ideas coming into it as to what we can do to drive more engagement, to get more diversity in terms of referrals. But I think we're going to learn an awful lot about other things that we could do and how to improve that further. And that sort of listening and learning piece that you just mentioned is paramount to ensuring that we do that effectively. So thanks a lot, Paul. Really interesting to get your thoughts from your wealth of experience in the sector. I think, it's important to say that, while we're at the beginning of our journey with these sort of DE&I pillars, we will be analysing all the data, getting feedback from users over the coming months as we launch these initiatives. And we're really looking forward to sharing our results with the market in the form of case studies. If you're interested in coming on this journey with us and working with us to support DE&I through referrals, we'd absolutely love the opportunity to work with you. And we're offering sort of reduced cost pilots so you can join us on this journey. You'll shortly see a slide which will have my details on them. And please do get in touch. If you've got any questions for Paul and me, you can use the chat function now. Paul's not actually around at this moment, but if you've got any specific questions for him, please do ask me, and I'll definitely make sure that we feed them back to Paul, and he'll revert on those points as well. But thank you very much, Paul, for joining me today. It's been great to do this with you, and we look forward to receiving some questions. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you, everyone. Please feel free to use the chat box chat function to question.